Thank you to the folks at Team 7 Star for providing a review copy of Code Bunny. Those of you looking for a fast-paced action platformer this holiday season are in for a treat with Code Bunny, a delightful blend of Mega Man, Celeste, and Sonic the Hedgehog. The first project from an indie dev team named Team 7 Star, Code Bunny is a charming platformer cater-built for speedrunning, featuring 2 playable characters, each with their own storylines and gameplay styles. Play as either Axel or Hazel through 6 stages, each a roller coaster of enemies, platforms, and spectacle-driven combat, as they slowly unravel a conspiracy that throws their very realities into question. Platformers are a genre that revolve around movement, so it's important that the team really take the time to nail it all down. And thankfully, movement and combat in Code Bunny is all buttery smooth. Each character has 2 buttons reserved for their unique special abilities, with Axel being more mobility-based, whereas Hazel focuses more on combat. Axel is a professional ice skater and expert in Taekwondo. He has less traction when in movement, being slow to come to a stop, but also a better jumper as a result, especially when utilizing his spinning dash move. When in the air, he can use a dive move that allows him to bounce off enemies, prolonging his airtime for advanced mobility and keeping his combos going. More than just a mobility aid, though, Axel's spin can protect him from projectiles, and striking enemies with it will fill his EX gauge. When full, the EX gauge grants him a few powerful new moves, such as a boosted dive kick, dash kick, or double jump. The other playable character, Hazel, is a former soldier and has a 2-part combat system that revolves around tagging enemies and then instantly dashing to their location with a strike of her blade. When not zipping around, she also has access to a standard 4-hit combo and a time-sensitive parry. In lieu of an EX gauge, she instead has a karma meter that fills as she maintains a combo, and is reset whenever she uses her homing attack. Any damage she both gives and receives will be proportional to the amount of karma she's built up, and if that amount exceeds her current health, she enters karma mode, where she deals 4 times as much damage, but any hit will knock her down to 1 HP. It sounds complicated, but in practice, it's a very interesting sort of risk-reward system where maintaining high combos rewards you with higher damage output at the risk of being punished for it should you slip up. Both characters have standard health gauges. Enemies drop health restores in pretty generous amounts, and Axel will restore health proportionate to his current combo count whenever a combo ends. Each level features several checkpoints, and players are given a level ranking at the end of each stage or boss based on how well they performed. This ranking system is where the gameplay of Code Bunny really shines. You're ranked on how quickly you finish the level and how long you manage to keep a combo going, and getting S ranks mean you also met those requirements without dying. The game even rewards no damage runs of any given level or boss with a coveted S+ rank, and maintaining your combo between 2 checkpoints will grant you a burst, adding 10 points to your total and granting an additional mark on your score screen. And it's in pursuing these S ranks that the intricacies of each character's playstyle really become clear. While my first casual run through the game as Axel didn't exactly blow me away, it was when I started pursuing those S ranks that it all finally clicked for me. Hazel's combat-driven style and ability to home in on enemies encouraged a sort of improvisational way of thinking that felt very freeing right from square one. Meanwhile, Axel's combat at first felt somewhat clunky and clumsy as he bounced around from enemy to enemy, and his slippery traction made it difficult to perform elegant platforming. But when I decided to start pursuing those S ranks, and thus learned what was necessary for each character to keep their combos going, I finally saw the beauty in Axel's moveset. His attacks all require a sort of deliberacy to each decision you make, planning ahead often in split seconds time to land every jump, hit, and bounce absolutely perfectly. And that sort of stuff is always going to feel incredibly fulfilling when you finally pull it off. And Code Bunny, to me, came off as a game engineered for that sort of replayability. The sort of speedrun mentality of playing something over and over and over until you finally get it perfect. And the game has an addictive quality that keeps that repetition engaging as you slowly get better and better. You can replay any level you've cleared at any time, and beating the game will also allow you to revisit just the bosses if you want. But while the game does keep records of your best scores for each level, it doesn't do so for bosses, and I kinda would've liked some recognition for my boss ranks. Each character's campaign consists of 6 stages, each with their own accompanying boss fight. Most of the stages are shared, but each character gets one that's completely exclusive to them. Each level feels distinct, and enemy and obstacle placement will even vary to account for each character's mobility and playstyles to ensure both characters remain unique. The stages are like a perfect middle ground between a Mega Man and a Sonic game. There's a special focus placed on effective dispatching of enemies, like in Mega Man, but each stage is also wide open and multi-tiered, like in Sonic, meaning that failing a jump more often than not just brings you to a slower alternate route rather than just killing you completely. Stages will even feature fun gimmicks. Yokkaido has air currents that launch you upwards or across wide gaps, and the final level loops in on itself vertically, creating an interesting sort of puzzle platforming that has you thinking outside the box. There's even an homage to Portal, with teleporting top hats in Wonderland, because they're rabbits, get it, that come in those very familiar orange and blue hues. The two character exclusive stages stand out as they allowed the level designers to really go ham in creating obstacles and set pieces emphasizing each specific playstyle. Hazel's exclusive level sees her zipping from target to target to cross massive bottomless pits, and Axel's underpass stage goes full Sonic Adventure 2, with grind rails that allow him to take advantage of momentum and additional moves granted from his EX gauge. The underpass is what really propelled Axel into the character I enjoy playing more. Despite being the simpler character in terms of moveset, he actually ended up feeling like the more skill-intensive one when compared to Hazel. The bosses also really give the chance for the characters to shine. Axel can land massive combos on enemies by angling his spinning attacks just right, and Hazel can deftly deal with bosses by taking advantage of her parry, as well as the fact that her homing attack protects her from damage. Code Bunny's music is lively and distinct, consisting of wonderful chiptunes harkening back to the 8-bit games the team clearly took influence from, and the sound design is exquisite, with every impact and blast resonant and clear. The graphics are also crisp and smoothly animated, with a lot of contrast between character and background to make every action and obstacle clear and readable at a moment's notice. The retro gamer in me does sort of wish the game had some filter options for scan lines or CRT effects and whatnot, but that's just a tiny nitpicky thing, and it isn't at all a deal breaker. I think the only place where the game's graphics stumble were in the character portraits. They look a bit slapdash, composed of big, blocky pixels and lacking any dynamic shading or lighting, and that doesn't feel like a purely stylistic choice like the rest of the game's visuals do. And if I can get a bit weird for a second, it can always be a bit concerning to see media with characters that look like Code Bunnies, if you know what I mean. But despite how it may appear at first glance, Code Bunny in no way presents itself as any sort of thirst trap or furry bait. The characters are all rabbits, sure, but aside from some harmless, jokey flirting between two of the characters, it's all presented in a completely innocent manner that's in no way sexualized. It's the sort of Minnie Mouse or Warner Brothers type of character designs, where you clearly get the impression that these characters are meant to be attractive to each other and definitely not to the audience. That being said, despite the brilliant graphics and sprite work, I felt like the character designs were maybe a bit too androgynous across the board. I wasn't even sure if I was playing as a male or a female most of the time. And while that doesn't really matter, it was something that stuck out to me, and it kept me from latching onto these characters as quickly as I would have liked to. And I think Code Bunny's story is probably where the game is at its weakest. The story as a whole is completely fine, even fairly ambitious at times. Both characters have their own campaign, with focus placed on their own backstories as the plot plays out. Some scenes do overlap between the two, but most of it is completely unique to one or the other, and the scenes that are shared do still tend to have minor variations to account for each character's point of view. In addition to the central storyline and cutscenes that play out both between and during each level, there's also optional scenes that you can check out from the mission menu to add additional lore or character building to the whole thing. There's no voice acting, it's all text, which isn't a bad thing on its own, but there are moments where the game has dialogue occur during gameplay in the form of subtitles. And with levels as hectic and input-intensive as these, there were times where I'd struggled to keep up with these additional story moments, or even miss them completely. As far as I can tell, there is no audio indicator or anything to notify you of subtitles popping up, and when you're really locked in on playing the game, it can make it easy to miss these little exchanges. I also felt that the story was trying to be a bit too clever, a bit too avant-garde for its own good. The villain's motivation really pushes against the fourth wall, and this metatextual twist was something that I don't think really landed as well as the writers maybe hoped it would. There's also one boss that, without spoiling anything, really requires you to think outside the box to find the solution, and for me, it straddled the line between clever and annoying. The story does mostly play itself straight until the final act, and its overall themes are pretty wholesome, but it's far from perfect. Still, one could argue that this is all a non-issue, as the game does include a classic mode that allows you to just play through the levels without interruption, and the rankings you achieve in either story mode or classic mode will always carry over into the other. As for bonus content, there isn't much, although the dev team has new content updates planned for 2025. As of right now, you can replay stages and bosses to your heart's content to chase after those S ranks, and beating the game with each character will unlock a speedrun mode that clocks your total time as you perform one clean run through every stage and boss. A casual run of Code Bunny is not particularly long nor difficult. It isn't unreasonable to say that you could easily clear both campaigns in the same day. But the real challenge, the real fun, the real longevity in Code Bunny comes in trying to get those S ranks. While the story comes and goes in a few hours, you can easily get dozens more out of the game once you really dive into its systems and set your sights on getting as good as you can possibly get. It's that sort of easy-to-learn, hard-to-master gameplay loop that makes all the best platformers so endlessly addictive, and if you're a fan of the genre, you should consider checking it out. Code Bunny is available on Steam as of December 19th. We give Code Bunny 8 spinning dive kicks out of 10.